Dobro polne, dobrodošli. Ljudi, gledajte tko je došao u naš mali lokal i tko je danas ovdje u Kicu. Ja sam beskrajno ponosan što je kraj mene i što sam mogu stati kraj Martine Petrović, osobe koja 15 godina i malo duže radi ovu kinematografiju, bez koje sigurno ne da ne bismo bili u ovoj sobi, nego ne bismo radili svoj posao koji radimo. Hrvatski audiovizualni centar sigurno ne bi postojao bez nje i jako mi je lepo vidjeti vas opet i osjećam se kao u neka stara vremena, a budući da i problemi stagniraju, tu smo svoji na svome. Srdačno zahvaljujem našoj Selmi i Zagreb Film Festivalu koji je u svom industrijskom programu ugostio ove sjajne goste, našu prijateljicu i briljantnu suradnicu Jaku Primorac, koja sa jednom iskričavom teorijskom opuštenošću prati dinamiku naše industrije, koju mi često doživljavamo dramatično. S nama je Ivana Kostovska, from Brooks, Makedonka from Brooks, also an expert on the field. I s nama je dakako Jakov Isak Nilsen, an expert and scholar from dear town of Aarhus. And so, as you know, the topic is going to be the big and small players and usual conundrum. So, one another opportunity to ask ourselves why the things are going so utterly wrong. I will hand now the words to Selma, just telling you that there is a tradition in kids, the way of communication of kids as an entity and the people on stage is usually when we ask questions on behalf of the kids. We don't use words, we use clips. So at a certain momentum, we're gonna give you a question clip to comment, and then we're gonna catch up. Zagreb Film Festival.
Dobar dan svima u ime Zagreb Film Festivala. Evo, jako mi je drago da smo i mi dio ovog projekta zajedno sa Institutom za razvoj međunarodne odnose, sa Jakom Primorac i cijelim nizom ljudi i aktera u filmskoj industriji. Htjela bih reći da smo mi kao Zagreb Film Festival, čini mi se, od kako festival postoji već više od 20 godina sad, kad bi morala sažeti u jednu kratku rečenicu kako je to izgledalo ovih 20 godina, to je uglavnom bilo kako se nositi sa različitim izazovima. Znači, susret sa izazovom, suočavanje s njim i onda rješavanje. I tako cijeli niz toga, od stvaranja repertoarnih kina do stvaranja kino publike, činjenja čuda sa malim iznosima o marketingu, do ponovnog gubitka tih istih repertoarnih kina i naravno do procesa streaming platformi. Sve su to, čini mi se, kao i nama na festivalu, tako i malim kinematografijama koji su danas tema ovdje, izazovi s kojima se svi zajedno suočavamo. Međutim, ono što mislim da je važno, koliko god oni bili teški, moguće ih je riješiti i okrugli stol poput ovog ovdje danas je ovdje baš da ponovno adresira, da nas stalno podsjeća na te probleme i da nam zapravo pomogne da zajedno pokušamo iznaći rješenje za njih i za ovo koje nam dolazi. Ja ću vas sad prepustiti našim gostima, samo ću na brzinu još probati ovo na engleskom. Hello everyone, I would like to welcome our guests in the name of the Zagreb Film Festival as well. During these 20 years of Zagreb Film Festival being on the film industry scene, we have been dealing with so many challenges all around, but what I think is important that even though they are always difficult, they are always possible to deal with and to find the solutions. So I hope this panel will also help us identify and maybe find new solutions for these challenges. Enjoy.
Dobar dan svima i hvala vam što ste došli. Prebacit ću se na engleski jezik radi naših gostiju. Thank you all for coming, and I would like to thank first of all our host, Cultural Information Center, and the director Libar, Selma Mehadić on behalf of Zagreb Film Festival, who are associate partners in this project. And of course, also our organizers, Creative Europe Media, Europe Desk Media Office, Croatia. I'm very happy to welcome you all here on this roundtable that we're doing as a part of our Christine project, which has started in March this year. It is a large consortium of 26 institutions from all over Europe, and it is a type of project that brings together academia and industry together in order to make positive solutions in the end, after, we hope, after 3 years of the project, which is funded by the European Union's Horizon Europe program. It is one of 3 projects that are funded by European Union that are dealing with the audiovisual industry in this period. But what makes our project special is that we are focusing on so-called small countries in Europe, and that we are actually among these 3 the ones that are the most including the industry into discussion. That is very much visible from the partners of our project, that deals not only from universities from all over Europe, but also we are including Marshall Film, EFAT, and other very important stakeholders, as they say, in the field. I'm also very happy that we're hosting this event in December, not only because it's birthday of Croatian Audiovisual Center, but also Media Desk Croatia, but also because it's the birthday of our institute. It's 60 years that we've been doing research in public policy focus, and especially our Department for Culture and Communication is very much involved in the research in the sector of culture and media for years now. I'm so happy to have here with us colleagues from the project. Jakob Isak-Nielsen from Aarhus University, who is a film scholar dealing with film studies and film aesthetics for years now, and Ivana Kostovska from Vrije Universitet in Brussels, media economist, very much focused in the last few years on research in the impact of streaming platforms on the audiovisual sector in Europe. And last but not least, Martina Petrovic, who has been very much involved in advocating for small countries in the media program, but without whom I think a lot of things that have been going on in Croatia in terms of either festivals, productions, co-productions have happened. The idea of this roundtable is connected to key challenges, as the policy speak usually uses this expression, that are happening in the distribution, production, and consumption, or as the terminology says, in the last couple of years, and especially this has been going on, the changes and problems that have the COVID-19 pandemic have put on the whole audiovisual sector globally, not only in Europe and not only in Croatia. The impact that the streaming platforms have done for the film and TV sector, especially. So there are a whole plethora of issues that are very, I think, important to discuss when talking about especially the small countries in Europe. In our research project, we are focusing on 7 countries. This is Denmark, Estonia, Ireland, Croatia, Lithuania, Portugal, and Flanders region of Belgium. I think that as one of our first speakers, I would give floor to Jakob Nielsen to give us kind of an overview, a comparative overview on what has been the picture of these small markets that we have been researching. I would like to highlight that we have started with a project at the end of March, so this is the preliminary data, so there are brackets in connection to that. But I think that the best is that Jakob presents some of this data, and that we can continue with other presentations, but of course with interventions in between. So I will give the floor now to Jakob and to see what are comparative issues today. Yeah, should we?
Oprostite, da li svi vidite od nas prezentaciju?
Thank you for inviting me. I'm very honored and pleased to be here and to be allowed to speak to you and to get your input as well. One of the pleasures of working on this project is to get know-how from many different small industries or small markets, if you prefer that term. I'm still myself in doubt as to whether you use the market or the industry term, depending on what we are focusing on. In addition to what Jakob already said, I would also add that I worked on a different project called What Makes Danish TV Drama Travel, which was in a way also a stepping stone for my interest in this project, and for me personally, moving back to film, where I started as a researcher, which I've quite enjoyed. But I would also say that some of the, let's say, the research questions that we work with on this TV drama-oriented project is also very relevant to this particular case. First of all, the work I'm leading, we are in the business of comparing our markets and industries to each other. And this has been an eye-opener, at least to me, in terms of how remarkably different these 7 different small markets are to each other. We asked all the participants at one point to write a short description of their local ecosystem, and it was very humbling to read that and to get to know also the historical circumstances of each individual market, explaining why are we where we are. Because it's very easy to see, okay, let's say the production service economy is booming and doing great in Croatia and in Ireland, and it's non-existent in Denmark, for instance. But does that necessarily mean that we can learn from that in a Danish context? So I think I'm going to start off sort of very broadly saying that the small film industries that we are looking into have the thing in common that none of them have a domestic audience which can make them sustainable commercially. At least not in the current media climate. Maybe if you go back to the 50s that was possible, but certainly not. So the question is, what kind of orientation do we then find in these 7 markets? And what our comparative analyses of many different indicators across the entire value chain indicate is that there are, at the very least, 3 overall orientation points, and often in a mix. But one is the orientation towards public funding, which is of course necessary in all of our markets, but it plays a different role in our markets. Then the next form of orientation would be production service orientation. What kind of tax credits, tax shelters, what production rebates do you have and what kind of role and function does it have within the ecosystem at large. Here there's a great discrepancy amongst our markets. Some are heavily inclined towards production service economy, I would say Ireland in particular, but also Croatia. In fact, most of our markets, except for Denmark. Denmark doesn't have a cash rebate, not a tax credit, not anything. And the Danish Film Institute and their CEO, I'm sure that Chris knows him very well, Claus Ladegaard, must be the most ardent opponent of production service there is, I imagine. But that's just to say that the orientation is very different. The last point of orientation is exports. And amongst these markets, it's mostly prevalent in the Irish context. Ireland, of course, as a world language, is in that particular situation of having a linguistic advantage in terms of export markets, but also, on the other hand, of having no protection at all against incoming Hollywood productions. And you can certainly see that in terms of, let's say, the way the Irish industry is organized. They're actually the most cinema-going public amongst our 7 markets. 2.6 cinema visits per inhabitant per year, but they just don't go to see Irish films generally, at least not to a very large extent. But we can see from the funding that's coming in, not the public funding, but through the cash rebate and tax schemes, that they, let's say compared to Denmark, the production sector is larger. They're just not working on Irish films to the extent that the case is in the Danish context, for instance. But I'll show you some slides to illustrate export orientation. And by that we simply mean, the films that we are making in our markets, feature docs and feature fiction films, where do they get their admissions? Is it primarily domestically or internationally or a mix? So that's the first thing I'll say. And well, in addition to that, from a stakeholder perspective, it's essentially, I would say, a question of asking yourself, what kind of industry do we want? And if you are sort of within the, let's say, the public funding scheme, there are many different considerations, obviously. What kind of funding scheme, infrastructure are you having? Are you having a mostly artistically oriented funding scheme or mechanisms, or is there a market scheme orientation as well, for instance? What is the level of public investment in films? Does it actually reach a level where you can, let's say, reduce the risk of private investment to the extent that you can actually get, let's say, substantial private investment in films? This is a constant balancing act. So if depending on the budgets that the national film boards have to operate with, and upholding a level of funding in films, if that is feasible even, that can attract private investment, particularly from distributors. So this is, one of many different considerations to be had. I think I would say that there are also some, these points of orientation can also be mapped according to some, what we would call ideal models that can help us characterize the different industries and how they're different from each other. This should illustrate an orientation towards domestic audiences versus international audiences, towards national public funding and towards international funding. And 4 different models. The first one, inspired by, let's say, within the public service broadcasting lingo, a public service media model, heavily oriented towards national public funding and domestic audiences, or a low language barrier model, which is very much oriented towards international audiences, to some extent also, of course, international funding, attracting international funding, but that's mostly prevalent in sort of what we call the production service model. And then the real question is, if you look at each industry, how are these different kinds of orientation combined? And this, I guess, the compromise model is that what essentially all our industries are some kind of compromise of these, let's say, ideal models. At least that's the way we are looking at it at the moment. Of course, these are ideal models. There are many different other kinds of important choices to take into consideration. But this is a long list of all, let's say, the indicators that we are actually looking into in the work that I'm leading. We are using some of the European Audiovisual Observatory databases primarily for this, but also other databases. This is a lot to digest, and I cannot, of course, and will not take you through all this. It will be too confusing and too numbers fixated. But I have highlighted some of the items that I will speak a little bit more about than others in the following slides, and segueing into talking about the importance of the VOD space and the VOD players to small ecosystems. This is an example of how we are showing or illustrating or visualizing our different markets. This is it's just an example, but I do think the calculations, they're not completely done yet, but they're not far off. This is an example of how you could represent the case of Ireland. If you see the inner circle, that kind of represents, let's say, the average performance across the time span of 14 to 22 amongst all our cuisine markets, as we call them, all the 7 markets that I had just mentioned. And then the real question is, on which parameter is Ireland outperforming the average? In terms of exports and in terms of festival recognition in particular in this respect, for instance. This is just an example of how we're going to play around with all that rich data that we have. Okay, but to give you sort of a sense on how different the various markets are, let's just look at some, let's say, overall graphic illustrations of the output, for instance. This is the output across 2014 to 2022 years. In this case, only fiction films across 3 different categories: 100% national, majority co-productions, and minority co-productions. And this in itself tells you something about the scale of the respective industries. It also tells you something about, well, how was the output actually impacted by COVID. You can see, let's say in the case of Croatia, the strong dip for 2022 and also to some extent for 21. And as an example, along with a similar case in Belgium, how COVID actually had a quite visible impact in terms of the output of productions. This also tells you a little bit about the orientation towards, let's say, minority co-productions. How important are they in the overall scheme of things within our different markets? Another thing I want to show to you, and this is a grim situation in Croatia, I'm sorry to say, but it's not the only market where there's a strong problem in terms of reconnecting the local audience to the local films. This is an overview of how the domestic market share for feature films has developed across the 2014 to 22 year span. And then, of course, the real question afterwards is, what's working? And what's not working? Where's the disconnect? How can we reconnect or help reconnect local audiences to local films? And the answer to this is not easy. I can certainly sometimes see, okay, what works in the Danish context is not necessarily transferable to other contexts. Just to give you a brief explanation as to why it's even possible to have such a high domestic market share. very high level of public funding. B, a cinema infrastructure that actually does not work against but work for a high domestic market share. Why? And this is where the peculiar things come into place. And this is where it's so fun to hear Jaka's explanation of the Croatian situation and so forth for all our markets. But in the Danish context, in the 80s, when many cinemas started to become commercially unviable, they were essentially in the process of closing down. But what actually happened is that many of them were picked up by local communities and run as non-profit cinemas. And today, out of the 168 cinema sites in Denmark, half of them are run by communities. So they are not in the commercial market. But what's interesting is that not all of them, some are placed in Copenhagen, but many are placed in the outskirts of the country. And in those areas, you actually have a much more, an audience that likes to see national films. So let's say that in the larger city areas with inhabitants of plus 100,000, there the market share for Danish film would be, let's say, 25. In those small cinema sites outside of those cities, the market share would be 50. So you can see that the cinema infrastructure is actually quite important. It's not to domestic market share, for instance. And of course, the role of distribution is also incredibly important in terms of what kind of distributors do you have and what kind of historical legacy do they have in terms of their ability, willingness and experience in terms of marketing their local films. Okay, in terms of international orientation, this is something that's a little bit interesting, to me at least. If you look at these slides, they show, let's say, they look at the total admissions to films from our markets for a 2014 to 22 year period. And then estimate, well, what's the share of international admissions compared to the share of local admissions. The size of the circle indicates the overall scale of admissions. So that gives you a sense of what are the admissions totally. And the yellow indicates the international share. And there you can see, let's say, the market for Irish films is international. It is to some extent also in the case of Belgium, where if you look at, I also have Flanders next to it, where you can see there is, I mean, Flanders compared to Belgium at last, it's somewhat more nationally oriented or domestically oriented market in terms of cinema admissions at least. But it's interesting to see how this pans out across the different markets. And of course, language plays a huge role, but in the case of Portugal, for instance, you would say, well, potentially there couldn't there be, like language-wise, a huge export potential for that market? Maybe so, but yet to sort of be exploited at least. Okay, and now I'm going to segue into the VOD space a little bit more for the last section of my presentation. So the question is, I mean, enter the Netflixes of this world, the VOD space. What are they friend or foe in terms of the local ecosystems? That's a very difficult answer to a question to answer. But I can at least, or we can at least, this is something that some of my colleagues at Aarhus have calculated. They've done a kind of a catalog analysis of how our cuisine market films are represented in VOD catalogs across Europe. And that's a little grim reading, I have to say. I have to say that it's at a particular point in time, October 2022. We also have made later sort of, let's say, snapshot images of how our films are doing in these VOD catalogs, but it's not been, so we haven't worked that data through yet. But you can see that a lot of, some of our films at least are in circa, 60% of our films are in some form of catalog or another. So that, in that sense, it's a good thing. What catalogs are they in? Well, they're usually in local, regional VOD catalogs. If you look at some of the large-scale VOD providers like Netflix and Amazon and so forth, it looks a little more grim. If you see, for instance, the case of Netflix's, and this is all their catalogs, like their catalogs in every single European market. What's the total number of titles that they had in their catalogs? That was 56. So it doesn't tell you that you could watch in Croatia 56 films in your Netflix account. It's an aggregated number. Maybe you could watch 12, 10, or even less, just to give you a sense of the scale of this. So this is, of course, this is a problem. Here you have it illustrated in terms of, like, say, how large a share of these films actually or were at this particular point in time, October 22, in these VOD catalogs. Amazon is the top performer, but we actually can't say for sure whether there's been a licensing transaction for the titles that are available. So yes, they are in the catalog, but to what extent it's financially lucrative to be there, that's a completely different question. I'd like to end this presentation with stepping into a conversation. And this is, in a way, it's a conversation that I followed for many years, both as a TV and film scholar. I mean, what are the consequences, what are the repercussions of the VOD field on the film and media industries overall? I followed this discussion for more than a decade. I wrote my first article on Netflix back in 2013, it's what the head of the producers union said back then when I interviewed him is similar to what I still hear in the public debates in the Danish context, which essentially that it's essentially the story of the collapse of the DVD market, and and that the money dropped from the near collapse of the DVD market has not been recuperated in the VOD field, regardless of you pull everything together, subscription VOD, transaction VOD, advertising VOD, you name it. That story is extremely, it's very persistent, I have to say. It's still part of the public debate, at least in a Danish context, and I imagine in other contexts as well. Then the other aspect of the introduction of VOD players was, of course, the discussion of its influence on the theatrical space. And there, of course, that discussion is very much dependent on how important is the theatrical space to the ecosystem as such. In a way, at least if I look at some of the, let's say, the theatrical market, it's incredibly resistant. I'm very impressed in it says that if you look at the theatrical sector, what they have struggled against, the competition from SVODs in particular, COVID and so forth, but they're still there. They are slowly recuperating from COVID and are, let's say, at a different range of recovery depending on which market you look at. In 2022, the recovery rate was about 70 in Croatia, compared to 2017 to 19 numbers. So, according to the European Audiovisual Observatory, who did a report on this earlier in the year. And in Denmark, the recovery was up to 82%. So it's close to pre-COVID years, but not quite there yet. It's quite impressive. But still, what kind of avenues are then opening up, if any, within the VOD space? I'd like to show you one example here of a cuisine film. Last week, 12th of December, Netflix announced a new report that they're calling a Netflix engagement report. Have any of you looked into it? Some of you have? And of course, it's a kind of self-reporting. always have to ask yourself, can this be trusted? But well, let's assume that it can be trusted. It counts the number of hours watched for individual films and seasons of TV series for a half-year period, January to June. And it was interesting, I mean, to me and to many others, to look into it and see what kind of patterns are actually emerging in Netflix's catalog on the basis of this. There are many things to say about this, but in terms of series, they completely dominate fiction films, but also because if you count hours watched per season of a series, obviously it has more minutes to, I mean, has more material to recruit hours watched. But if you look at films particularly, you would find something like this, a very generic romantic drama, Danish language, about a fisherman who makes it as a musician. A fisherman, this is why I'm wearing this t-shirt, just to illustrate the fisherman connection. It's not, critically, it was certainly not a well-reviewed film. It's a very sort of typical genre film. But the director, who lives in my own burg of Aarhus, by the way, he's very happy. Why will Netflix and others, SVODs, what they invest in licensing is, from what we can gather, close, not important, close to being insignificant in some cases. But if they enter the co-financing and commissioning part of the industry, that's where something can really change and it can have an impact actually on the production sector. So this particular film was viewed for close to 46 million hours in just 1 month. And it's a 99-minute film, so what I did, I tried to sort of recalculate. If we calculate according to how many viewers watch it from beginning to end, this would translate to about 500,000 viewers in a month. And in terms of activations, it would probably be more closely to, like say, maybe closer to 1 million, and then people dropping out and so forth. We don't know this. But still, from a director whose first film didn't even get support from the Danish Film Institute of any sort. So obviously it allows for certain filmmakers and TV drama scriptwriters and showrunners and so forth to run a business profitably, and also and this has characterized the debate, at least where I'm based in Denmark, and there's been a very heated debate between those in the production sector who are in the business, I mean, who do business with Netflix or HBO Max and so forth, and let's say, are considering it, and those that do not. So it's an extremely heated debate, and we can maybe talk more about that during the discussion. Then the last thing I'll mention is Safe Place. What a brilliant film! What's kind of, when I'm looking from the outside at a film like Safe Place, I'm also a little bit sad that, simply speaking, this film is too good to only be seen by 9,000 people in Croatia, according to Lumiere Pro. Simply too good. And it has now appeared in, according to Lumiere VOD, is now available in 12 different VOD catalogs. So it's out there at least. But for instance, it's not available in the Scandinavian market at all. At least not at the moment. Maybe it's in the process of being sold to those markets. I hope so. But this is so the question is, I mean, okay, there are possibilities within the VOD space, but for what kinds of films? What kinds of films are primarily being funded? Do they have to have this kind of combination of speaking to a local audience as well as to a transnational audience? There's been a lot of debates about the concept of conspicuous localism, a term that Timothy Hayden's, an American researcher, has launched. Meaning that, well, okay, some of these films, they are anchored in a particular place, but not really anchored. And this has driven some very heated discussions, at least in my own backyard of Denmark. But we can return to that question also. But I think that's where I'll leave it for the time being, and say that's just a quick sort of a flyover in relation to our work and its relevance to the VOD field as well.
Thank you very much, Jakob, for this detailed overview of some of the things that we've been doing in our project, because there are many other things that we're doing in our project. For me, when we were first looking at the data, I was very much surprised how audience levels in Croatia and Portugal and in Ireland are kind of similar. I had different expectations for example, for these countries, especially for Ireland. And I know that from the discussions with our colleagues from Portugal, that their kind of trials in gathering more international audience just because they're speaking Portuguese, and in order to get more audience in Brazil, which is kind of logical for Portuguese films, that with their kind of policies towards funding co-productions with Brazil, it didn't result with many more viewers, because the audience in Brazil actually does not understand Portuguese. So these are kind of some of the kind of the backlashes of some of the policy interventions, for example. But you have opened a lot of questions. So if there are some pertinent questions for Jakob right now, I open the floor. But if there are not, we can discuss, of course, there will be time later on after all the presentations. I would like to give the floor to Ivana Kostovska. Jakob has already kind of opened some issues in regards to VOD, in regards to streaming and our markets. But Ivana will go more in depth into the investment obligations and the impact of them for our countries. So Ivana, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Htjela bih se zahvaliti Jaka i Irmona i Zagrebačkom festivalu na organizaciju i na pozivu. Jako mi je drago da sam u Zagrebu. Then I will continue in English because my Croatian is not that well. So today I will discuss, as Jaka has asked me to discuss more on the investment obligations for streamers as a policy measure, which is quite often discussed recently. Just a few weeks ago, I had a chance also to discuss investment obligations at the European Audiovisual Observatory conference in Brussels, and also there are discussions in other markets. For example, recently in the Netherlands, because they also, as probably some of you know, they are introducing investment obligation for streamers. So investment obligation as a policy measure is just one type of policy measure that we will look into in Gesine. From a policy perspective, we want to come up with policy recommendations in every work package and that we have as part of the project. But we also, as Smith VOB partner in the project and in collaboration with other partners, we're deeply involved into analysis of the policy and support measures, and probably the key aspect is to see how the investment obligations and other type of policy measures fit together in different markets, and what are the differences that we see in every market, and also how the policy mix fits together. So we already have some experience in terms of the investment obligation, and we're building on a study that Smith we publish. We try to publish it annually, and our forthcoming study is expected to be published quite soon. This is the latest version that we published in 2022, where we analyze different models of investment obligations, and we try to see the first results from countries that already have investment obligations for several years. That's France and Germany and other markets. And I know that this is an important question probably for Croatia, because we also have a model of investment obligation which is specific to the Croatian context and probably context of a small market, but I will get back to that towards the end of my presentation. So what we see is that a member state's choice to introduce more or less ambitious investment obligation is often driven by factors such as policy traditions, established industry norms, and macroeconomic conditions. And taking these factors into consideration is important, because they can explain why the impact of global streaming services is not the same in every market. And naturally, we see that this leads to different policy responses. As you can see on the slide and on the map, there are different models of investment obligations with different rates. I won't get into explaining all the rates that exist in different policy contexts. But if we take France, for example, we can see that France has a long established tradition of regulating the sector to protect independence and diversity. And based on the French example, we can see that investment obligation for streamers was introduced in a similar way as for the domestic sector for some players, and it's related to the length of the release windows. Then if we see Poland and Germany, they have a model of investment obligation in the form of levy, because they have a tradition of collecting levies from the players in the industry and then redistributing them in the industry in form of policy support. So we can see that there is what we call a path dependency, meaning that previous policies which existed in a way drive the way in which investment obligations are formulated. But what deserves attention, I would say, is that when we compare the rates and we see beyond the big five on the big five markets, we can see that not all member states are in a position, or to say even more directly, have the power to introduce investment obligations with high rates. So as a result, we see that the industries in these, let's say, smaller markets are put in a competitive disadvantage compared to industries in some other larger markets, which have high rates of investment obligations, and then they attract investments by streamers. Of course, streamers don't decide to invest in certain markets just because of the investment obligation, but if we have a member state which has high quota for national titles and also high rate of investment obligation, and then if we have some smaller member states which don't have national quotas, it's logical to expect that they would invest in these larger markets also because of the scale of these markets. And you can see this is the first evaluation that was done in France, because France is one of the countries that quite early on introduced investment obligations, and they can already analyze the first results. So this is, you can see that they try to compare the investments from the linear services and from the VOD services. So here you can see that the average contribution of global streamers in French films was 1.2 million euros, and they invested in total in 17 films in France. So an important aspect from analyzing and the way that we want to approach and compare and see what elements of the investment obligations as part of the policy frameworks work well is that we want to see also how member states approach the process of evaluation and seeing which part of the data is publicly available, how they collect information for streamers, and then how is this experience also exchanged between the screen agencies and film funds to build a better knowledge. And it's also important to see beyond the data that is published by the national regulators and sometimes in collaboration with the screen agencies related to investment obligations. So this is what you can see on the screen is a comparison of national and European titles in global SVOD catalogs, and it's important to mention, as Jakob said before, this is just a snapshot, so because catalogs are constantly changing, so we analyze them in a certain period of time. This was an analysis done this month, but we will continue to kind of see how these dynamics are changing. And here you can see the share of national titles as a percentage of European works in Netflix and Amazon Prime catalogs. So you can clearly see the differences between the markets here. So the idea is that for small ecosystems and small markets, it's an important aspect is also to see how the investment obligation models in combination with the quota and with other type of policy measures work well together, and whether there are some small ecosystems that can learn from the experience of other ecosystems that we will analyze as part of Casine. Finally, I mean, when it comes to data, it's also, as Jakob said, for the first time we see more extensive data that was published by Netflix, and here we can see the differences between Casine and the Big Five in terms of titles on Netflix. You can see that the biggest circle are US films, but these are just number of selected big markets that we analyze as part of Casine. That's also important to mention. So we have UK, Poland, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. Maybe it's not that visible. And from the Casine markets, it's relevant to mention that some of the small markets don't have titles which are mentioned. And for me also it was surprising that Portugal was also it's basically not on the map. And I was kind of expecting that because of the language and that there would be titles, but it's not. What is also, I think that one of the key questions for small markets that we can mention at this moment while we're still conducting the research in terms of policy is that it's important to see how the markets that we analyze and when we try to make comparison between the smaller and the larger markets, how they try to balance different type of policy measures, for example, investment obligations and tax incentives. Because in some markets we see that they're more focused on tax incentives, and then streamers, of course, they openly say that they're interested to invest in markets where there are tax incentives, and it's sometimes there are challenges for the industry when there is no good balance between different type of policy measures. And when we look at the more granular level, at the level of individual titles, I don't know if you can see the slide well. We see that that some of the titles from the casino markets from Denmark have high number of views than some titles from Flanders and Ireland. And again, we see a trend where UK titles are popular. I mean, we're looking just films, we're not looking at TV content because the focus of the project is on film. But this kind of give us a good overview of where our small casino markets are standing in terms of the other markets and how the content from these small markets is circulating to other markets. And of course, the broader dynamics then we can see when we analyze the export and the number of markets where these titles are available. So just to sum up today's presentation, investment obligations, we see that they're becoming factors that impact competitiveness, and for the markets it's important not just what type of investment obligation they will have, but also at what moment they will introduce investment obligation. We see differences in terms of markets that introduce this type of policy measure early than some markets who want to introduce investment obligation now when as we know, streamers are already facing challenges and they lobby strongly against investment obligations. We also see challenges in some smaller markets where they have difficulties to oppose to the strong lobbying by streamers, and probably that's also the case in Croatia. So even when there is an ambition to have a high rate of investment obligation, that is difficult. So certainly an important aspect is how the smaller markets also are dealing also in terms of lobbying to have type of investment obligation that would on one hand support the robustness of the production sector, but on the other hand it will also support the idea of having a content that would circulate to other markets. And as I said at the beginning, the key is how to find a formula that would show that the investment obligation work well as part of the broader policy mix in every national policy context, and this is different. So there are some solutions that can be applied from one context to another, but we see that the investment obligations as a model cannot be copy-pasted easily in every policy context. That's the end of my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. And if you have, of course, if you're interested and continue the discussion, in the next few years, we will focus a lot of attention on policies, so you can get in touch with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ivana, for your presentation. It's for me. Yes, we're moving to sections. For me, it was kind of sad to see that while there are also talks about the discoverability of content in the case of small markets, we're still talking about availability of content at all. I would like now to give the floor to Martina Petrovic from Creative Europe. Just short. Media Office Croatia, who has been very much involved in advocating for small countries in the media program for years. Not only that there was a conference that you organized in 2020 on this issue, but as far as I know, and most of you probably don't know, that Martina has been involved since 2014 on this issue when she was asked by the Maltese government to actually allocate and present the case of small countries in the media program. So I'd like to give floor now to Martina to present data more on Croatia and position kind of Croatian producers and productions and films in the overall media program.
Thank you. Even though I'm not officially part of Cristina project, we didn't sign any collaboration agreement or similar, I feel very much privileged to be involved, starting with this May when we first presented the project during Cannes Film Festival and later on during Tallinn Black Night. So I feel very much honored to be here today and to share with you important data. So, I looked at the time, so I will try my slides to really kind of summarize what I'm trying to say. Yes, this year, as the Croatian Audiovisual Center, some also the formation of Media Desk Office Croatia, but also Croatian participation in the media program started 15 years ago. So unlike you are more into the retirement, we are more into the teenage years. We actually, Croatians, since 2008 until today secured 40 million euros. Mostly the focus was on the development of Croatian films, TV series, shorts and video games, but there is an exception also when it comes to the production, the most difficult call to fulfill. And here I would like to outline The Last Socialist Artifact as the only Croatian TV series to be supported by media in terms of the development and the production. Also, on the list, you can also see there were 6 Croatian film festivals, 10 Croatian distributors were securing promotion and distribution of non-national European films. And in total, 201 Croatian organizations participating in 611 projects with 62.8% participation of women in terms of the applicants, but also directors, producers, and head of different organizations. In a nutshell, so ever since media was introduced in 1991, the focus was on the development of the European audiovisual industry, and until today it represents the only European fund focusing on the European audiovisual industry. If you ask media desks and stakeholders, we preferred the part when we were single program, just because the things were much easier in terms of administration and bureaucracy, and not that things got complicated in 2014, merging with the sub-program culture. It just became overwhelming in terms of applying video projects. So from 2014, so it's the umbrella Creative Europe, covering culture and media together, and the offices still remain separate in terms of culture office as a part of the Ministry of Culture and Media, and media office as attached to the Croatian Visual Center. This is the circle that media focuses on. However, the share of the budget in terms of the different parts of the value chain is not sometimes, let's say, equal. You can see from different programming periods that the attention and financing switches. So you will see later on where the focus in the new programming period is now. Just to spice up my presentation so that you all can wake up, I like to use also this opportunity to share with you the great results from 14 to 20. And Croatians, I saw, referring to your slide, that of course it was difficult during the COVID-19 times, but we were in 2020 one of the best Croatian results in terms of withdrawing media funding. So let's have a video. Let's have a look at the video. Did it help, or I just go on? I'm afraid to listen. The next one.
It's very good.
Okay. Thank you. So, in a nutshell, 14 calls. This is also the period when video games were introduced, and co-production funds as well. And overview was that at that time we had more countries involved, 39 countries, and you can see the total budget was 736 million euros. So we come to the distribution of money in terms of the audiovisual capacity. I know that most of us don't like to be divided into different groupings, and we like to be called big and small countries instead of high, medium, low audiovisual capacity, but that's how Brussels decided to put us into different categories. From 14 to 20 we have 3 categories, and you can see that countries like Big 5, which included also the UK, France, Italy, Spain, and Germany, were taking most of the budget. So 57.6%, medium, like Scandinavian, Nordic countries, Benelux and similar, 31%, and small, a total of 25 countries, 11.4%. In terms of, I moved, sorry. This is how the distribution of the projects was divided, which is really interesting to see that the big countries have led the least projects to be supported with the biggest financing chunk, and the small countries had the most projects supported by the least financing chunk. In 21 to 27, after COVID-19 pandemic, we had some increase in the whole budget of Creative Europe program. But you also need to be aware, we also get increase in terms of the total number of calls. So instead of having 14 million now, is responsible for 17 calls. The number 3 is something that is highlighting the whole program, and especially putting extra points, giving extra points to the cross-cutting priorities such as collaboration, greening, and gender, in terms of the diversity and inclusion. To understand the division of the countries, so the UK is out, Poland became small country, so it's a low division capacity, and Liechtenstein is in. You also have the participation on non-EU countries participating fully, like Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, North Macedonia and Serbia, but also non-EU countries like Georgia, Ukraine and Tunisia, believe it or not, participating partially. So this is how they are divided, and I would like to highlight the low audiovisual production capacity division into 2 groupings, because, for example, Croatia was very much successful in the last period, and in a way we are put in a different grouping in comparison to Luxembourg. Yeah? But if you compare those two, Luxembourg is a small territory, it has definitely more sources of financing, and Luxembourg, producers from Luxembourg get scholarships more than the Croatian producers, because we belong to the Group A, thanks to the success results in the previous programming period, which is of course absurd. I'm just putting out also absurdity in terms of the division of the markets. So how do we define one country to be small, low division capacity, because Poland is now a small country, at the same time Luxembourg, and at the same time Croatia as well. So Croatia and Poland belong to the Group A. You can't tell now the goals. On purpose, I didn't highlight it. There are 17 of them, divided into 3 clusters. And this is the distribution in terms of the total in projects. So, how the European Commission and I would say the agency is now dividing the budget, as there are 3 different clusters. So, content focusing on films, development and production, business more onto distribution, markets, and training, and audience like festivals, networks of festivals, VOD platforms, and I'm missing one, audience development and education. So you see that most of the projects are supported under the business sector, then we have content, and then we have audience. So the most money goes to the business sector. And this is 46.9% of the total media budget goes to the distribution, goes to training, goes to the markets, and some weird goals where, for example, Croatians cannot apply, like Media 360. But let's go into the details of the content. This was taken from the reporting done by the European Commission. And it's interesting because I expected that in the reporting they will analyze every single call, but they analyzed only those calls where small countries are so-called success stories. So you will see also my slides, but you will also understand the European slides as well. This is the European slide. Just to give you an overview, so content has 5 calls, having the TV and online as the only production call. And of course, it takes most of the money, 36 million euros. Then we have a slate, which is for, let's say, clusters of projects, and all countries are involved in terms of being eligible. Then we have co-development to production companies from 2 different media countries applying for one audiovisual project. We have, for example, 117 projects supported by only 11 million euros. Mini slate is for the low division capacity countries, so a total of 21. And you have again quite some number of projects supported by 9.5 million euros in comparison to slate, for example, and video games with 6 million euros. So the production takes 36.9% and co-development 11.3%. In terms of the genre, fiction leads with 73, documentary 25, and animation 19. In terms of the geographic origin, well, Croatians were quite active in 21 and 22, and we were really highlighted as the success story because we had a total of 10 co-development projects. When I say geographic origin, means only the production companies. So the 10 projects include Croatian projects, but it also includes participation of Croatian production companies into different non-national films. Only Latvia and Malta didn't have any co-development project supported by media. Mini slate, so only small countries or low division capacity countries. The difference is that one project assumes cluster of 2 to 3 films. So that's why you have like 75 projects, but the development is for 200 features and 34 shorts. Just to see the difference. Fiction taking again the most, 72%, documentary 20%, and animation 8%. In terms of the geographic origin, so it's one company applying with several projects at the same time. Croatia also is really doing well, as well as the Czech Republic. Then what we have to highlight is that only Bosnia and Herzegovina did not succeed to be successful in the mini slate applications for 21 and 22. Those are now my results because they were not represented in the report or by the Commission. Because slate results, they're open to all production companies coming from all media countries. But I purposely highlight also slate because you see that there are some unusual suspects there, like Czech Republic having 2 slates supported under the quite competitive scheme, but then we have also Greece, Lithuania, Luxembourg, and Poland being also part of the success results. In 22, Slovenia is leading with 2 slates under very competitive scheme, as well as with 1 slate Czech Republic and Serbia. When it comes to the TV and online, it's really complicated, but it doesn't only mean that it's complicated on the European side, it's also complicated from the national side, because I learned it also last week during NEM. Scandinavian and Nordic countries are really taking a lot of money from the TV and online just because they have structured system, and you also have a Nordic TV fund, but the televisions are really willing to get involved and to support high-end drama series. But you can see that also in 21, Bulgaria had, for example, 2 projects, as well as the Luxembourg, and were 1, Czech Republic, Estonia, Greece, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. In 22, Iceland is on board as well, because Iceland was also really leading in 2014 to 20, taking most of the money, a couple of million euros for their production of TV series and it really stood out from the Scandinavian and Nordic countries. Now, to understand the business sector, because this is where the most money goes in terms of financing projects, film distribution takes 63 million euros, which is from the whole cluster 37.2%. In terms of the markets, you have 23 millions. Thanks God training is also kind of supported with 33 million euros, media 306 to 20, and sales agents with 9.3 million euros. In terms of audience, you see that Europa Cinema is leading. It's the only cinema network to be supported by media. Then it's Films on the Move with 27.5 million euros, VOD, and so on, individual festivals, audience development festival networks, and similar. What I would like to highlight here, I will skip this, that throughout the whole period, there is always a problem, not only in terms of accessibility to the different halls, but the level playing field plays an important role in terms of the whole audiovisual chain. Here there is a huge problem still, although I thought that we advocated it quite often and in really one-to-one discussions, transparency of the results. Because, for example, with Europa Cinemas, you cannot see the financing part given to a specific cinema, and especially through the calls like Collaborate to Innovate. And I always get this information on the phone, which is, in my case, a bit weird, since I always say that I need to present the results and to give also to national authorities and for the PR aspect, and especially since Europa Cinemas is directly funded by media, and when it comes to the cinemas, it's important where we stand in terms of the financing, and especially with the call Collaborate to Innovate, which was initiated during the COVID-19 pandemic, after COVID-19 pandemic, because they tried to also establish collaboration between cinemas and to give them boost, since we more switched into the watching films online. And the third thing that is still problematic is the diversity of European films. So you saw that there is quite some diversity in terms of the development, but when it comes to the distribution, French films take around 39% of being distributed, followed by 15% from by German films, and then you have some highlights like Norwegian films, Polish films, Czech films. Other than that, it's quite straightforward, you know, and somehow the money gets back to those that take most. So, in terms of the diversity of European films, we really need to focus also on how this problematics of diversity of distribution of European films needs to be highlighted if we want to have a level playing field throughout the whole audiovisual chain. So I was really quick and short, so yeah. Do you have any questions? Yeah?
Thank you, Martina.
Thank you for your very neat and analytical contribution. I think all these engineering elements will be very resourceful thing to reach the next chapter, or somehow the real questions. I just come here with a special thank for changing the title. And also, I would like to thank Martina because she made this she omitted, and she said capacity thing. Because we kind of agreed, let's not discuss capacities. Since, we don't call black people Negroes or low people midgets. So somehow there was one impulse out of politeness to talk about small and big countries, not about the level of capacity. But also it's because somehow we felt, or at least I feel, that capacity country is not the right term in terms of its logics. Because even listening to you and looking at your data, can it be maybe that there are no low and high capacity countries? Maybe there are not even small and big countries in terms of filmmaking. There are low and high filmmaking communities, and low and high filmmaking elites, or low and high political elites, and there are low capacity and high capacity cultural politics. Because the Denmark has, except for being rich, it has all elements to be a very small capacity country. And Romania, being far bigger, has all elements to be, whatever, stronger, high capacity. I can assure you, and thank you very much for this accurate data on our country, on Croatia. I can assure you, if Croatia was 5 times bigger, with 5 times bigger market, it would have the same shitty results, because it would remain the harvesting place for American industry that is controlling the cultural policy of this country. So, I think what we should be fighting for is more higher capacity film communities that will develop their capacity to influence political elites. And we should hope to the less capable political elites to dilute our interests, because things can be done. And here comes the question from kids about one country, one context of using word capacity, and let's our very good friend have to express himself. Please, Vedran.
My capacity, and when you were wake up at 3:30 in the morning, going to the set, going to the countryside, then 4 o'clock in the morning in November, you don't have any heating anywhere, and you are just waiting for a little light. Finally we can press the button on the camera, and Fred was with me, and he knew how it is when we were absolutely frozen, and the actors are over. The guy was drinking in the whole night, and he doesn't know where is he now, and the girl is just broke up with her boyfriend, and her eyes were totally, you could not see in her eyes because full of tears, and you are there and you have to do something, but why? Why? And you know why? Because when you do your life, you see something, and which is touching you and moving you and stuck to your brain, and you have a feeling you have to share with you because you think it's important, not only for you, for all of us. And this is the reason why we are doing this job, not for the film industry. Today I met with young people, today morning, they were asking my advice, and I don't have advice. Just they have to find their own language, they have to be themselves, they have to fuck off the film industry, and they have to, you know, if they don't have money, don't worry. They have phone, they can do a movie with their iPhone, or they can editing on their computer and distributing on the internet. But the most important thing, they have to be free, and all of us has to be free.
It's difficult to say anything else.
What kind of country is Hungary?
Yeah.
It must be high capacity or just country with a fucked up capacity?
I think we can discuss about that during our cocktail reception that is waiting for us in the lobby. I would like to thank you all for coming. Thanks for our presenters for their wonderful presentation that will incite, I think, really a lot of discussions in the break now. And please follow our work and we'll probably be in contact with you to help us gather more data and actually do some positive change to film in our countries. So please welcome to the reception and thank you all for coming.